Hi everybody, welcome to Tidalwave Studio. My name is Damiani, and today I would like to talk a little bit about the phase relationship between different signals and show you some examples. Let's dive in. Alright, phase relationship between signals. What exactly is that? I try to explain it really simply. Imagine a drum that's being played. So you have the head that's being hit, and this head is oscillating around a neutral axis. So it's moving back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And now, if you pick this up with a microphone and try to play it over a speaker, the speaker is emulating the same movement, moving air and producing the sound that we are hearing. So now imagine having two microphones picking up the same thing, one pointing in that direction and the other in this direction. And now this head of the drum is moving towards one microphone while it's moving away from the other, and vice versa. Now, if we add these two microphones and put it on the speaker, and the speaker is trying to play back those two signals at the same time, because they are mixed together, the speaker tries to move forward and backwards at the same time, and it is stuck somewhere in between. So the worst thing that can happen is that you get a lot of cancellation of your signal because the speaker is not able to move anymore because it doesn't know forwards, backwards, and it's just stuck somewhere in the middle. And other things that can happen is that it's just sounding weird because two waveforms that are not moving in sync and working perfectly together, they just somehow interact in a weird way. Imagine throwing a stone into a still lake that is going to form some waves, and now you throw in a second stone that is also producing some waves, and those two waves are going to interact in some way one with another. So, but it's pretty unpredictable what's going to happen. So you have to make sure that all your recordings play well together. I'm going to show you a couple examples, and the most easy example to show is the drum kit. Let's listen to the drum kit with a healthy phase relationship, and then I'm going to flip around the phase on some signals and we see what happens. Okay, everything sounds fine. The bass drum is thick, the snare has a lot of punch, and all the hi-hats and overheads, they sound perfectly fine. Now let's isolate the two bass drum microphones I used. I have one microphone inside and one microphone outside. They are picking up the same instrument, and as soon as you are picking up one source with two microphones or more, that's where you have to be careful. So let's isolate the bass drum on its own. Okay, they sound fine one with another. This is the internal bass drum mic. This is the sub kick, the outside microphone, picking up only the lows. Okay, let me mute the room mics for a second so that we hear the kit very focused, and then I'm just going to flip the phase on one of the bass drum microphones, and you will immediately hear what's going to happen. You can hear that the bass drum is really getting thin, losing all its weight, and just somehow feeling strange. And that's exactly what happens. So the speaker is trying to play in phase and out of phase at the same time, and it's just losing some information on the way. So when you are recording drums, really pay attention to this very important detail. Let's say you pull up the overheads, everything sounds fine, you add in the bass drum. First thing, before touching any EQ or anything, just flip that phase around. In phase, out of phase, and just see what sounds best. One of both will definitely sound beefier and the other one will sound thinner. Go for the beefier, of course. Now let's see what happens to the snare if I flip the phase on one mic. Now that's a drastic change, right? So the snare top microphone is not matching the overheads and the bottom mic anymore at all, and it's almost completely cancelling out. Fortunately, it's an easy fix, just flip the phase and all is fine. By the way, if you want to see how these drums have been recorded, we made a little series about producing a metal song showing every detail. I'm going to link here and in the description to it. Now, one thing that is often done with drum recordings is that they are augmented. So you add samples to just make the drum kit sound a little bit bigger. Imagine you're recording drums in a smaller room and you want somehow to have more atmosphere, like a larger snare, more power, whatever, and you're adding in a sample. Also with added samples that are like from a different set, you really have to pay attention to the phase relationship. Let me pull up like a trigger track. We're adding in a sample of another snare to the snare that we have here, and then we flip the phase on that sample and see what happens. Okay, this is the snare we're adding. All together. Now I let it play and then I flip the phase. Not quite so drastic as with the original sounds, but still, it's just somehow sounding hollow. And if you really want to beef up your drum set, take care of this before you just ruin it instead of augmenting it. Now a final little thing that you may not have heard of. Imagine you are recording your drum set, you're checking the phase, everything is fine, it sounds great. And then you start EQing and think, there's a little bit of rumble here on the snare or whatever. And you pull up a low cut filter, so remove all the bass, and suddenly somehow it sounds weird. Well, using low cut filters can introduce a shift in the phase of a signal. This is really something you should keep an eye on. Let me just show you what I mean. Okay, here is our snare track and I just duplicated it so that we can render in a low cut filter and see what happens. So here I have an EQ with a low cut that I've set to around 160 Hertz and I just render it in and now we see what happens. Okay, now compare those two waveforms. It's the same snare that originally was perfectly matching, and now somehow in some sections they are completely out of phase and will cancel out each other. The only way to prevent this would be, let me undo this, to use a linear phase EQ. If I render this in now, the phase relationship stays the same. So if you recorded one source with multiple microphones and tend to use a low cut or a high cut filter on that source, make sure to use a linear phase EQ so that the phase relationship stays the same and is not changing over time. A little fun story at the end. I once had a drum recording session where the snare drum was changing pitch all the time. So it was detuning within minutes during playing of a song. So while the first bars were perfectly in phase, snare to overheads, it just degraded over time. The snare was detuning and somehow the relationship between the microphones shifted over the song. This was a huge pain. So I had to go in and move the snare track around to try and fix it somehow. That was really awful. So maybe also have an eye on stuff like this when you're recording drums. There is always something waiting for you to ruin all the fun. Alright, thanks for watching. I hope there was something of value for you. If you like this kind of content, consider subscribing to the channel, leave me a comment, maybe some ideas for upcoming videos, and see you in another video. Bye bye!